Being a Wesson, growing up, it was a lot of pride, integrity. You know, you're carrying a legacy. I mean, the name goes back pretty far, you know, back to DB, as we would refer to DB1, you know, co-founder of Smith & Wesson, and the whole lineage from there is, you know, multiple generations in the gun industry. So for me, the history, I'm very well versed up to 1994 when I had left. You know, everything happens for a reason in life. Shannon and I, we grew our family. You know, we had two beautiful kids, Morgan and Daniel. And, you know, life gets in the way, I guess. But throughout the years, I've been preserving history, as you can see, and hopefully someday that the story would be told, and here we are today. Come on down. I absolutely miss the gun industry and how welcoming the gun industry was. And I'm sure still today, it's the same. The history after leaving, it's a little clouded for me. I know the basics, right? With Bob Serva introducing the 1911 platform, and today, now, with CZ producing that 1911. Maybe someday CZ can, we can reintroduce the revolver. I think that would complete me as a person. As a Wesson, throughout the years, we've always been manufacturers. We like to make things. In the old days, to be a gunsmith, you had to be an apprentice. My father was an apprentice toolmaker at Smith & Wesson when he was younger. My grandfather was an apprentice toolmaker. He started out as an apprentice toolmaker. He was a Wesson, and he still had to go through the ranks. But that's what he did. He loved to make tools and dies, and loved to machine, you know, parts and make guns. When Dan was working at Smith & Wesson, he was a plant superintendent, plant supervisor. So, you know, he was in charge of production. He'd rather do that because, you know, he was on the floor. But then there was a change of priorities with the direction he wanted to go and the direction that Smith & Wesson was going at the time. So he decided to transition and go into business for himself. In the early stages of Dan Wesson Arms, getting up to speed with production, it was difficult. But my grandfather never wanted to compromise quality. He wasn't in a rush to ramp up production, even though there was such a huge demand for the revolver. He didn't rush things, and he actually got criticized for that quite a bit in the early stages. And they had plenty of orders, but he was trying to scale up production, but never wanted to compromise on quality. His goal was to make the best double-action revolver in the market. You know, I think that was his goal to set out from the beginning, and I think he really achieved that. And they were doing wonderful, and the sky was the limit, and then sudden passing in 1978 of my grandfather, and it was the day after Thanksgiving. That was a tough call from my father got, I remember. It shocked the world. Went in the next day, on a Saturday and the weekend, and my father cleaned out my grandfather's office. He put it all up in the attic of our house growing up. It was off limits. You know, and a lot of that content is here. You know, I've been able to preserve and put it up on the walls here. You know, after that, it kind of shook up the business quite a bit, obviously, when you have your lead guy there, the whole vision. You know, can the company continue? Priorities changed again, so the family had separated from the company for a period of time. And then in 1990, my parents were approached from Ed Arventis, who was the executive vice president of Dan Wesson Arms at the time, and to ask my parents if they were interested in buying the assets through the bankruptcy court. So they did, and they were in a position to do that. So during that transition time, when production started in January 1991, my parents, with the partnership of Ed Arventis, they changed the name for liability reasons to Wesson Firearms, home of the Dan Wesson revolver. That was the motto. And at that point, there's an incredible outreach from the industry. Support, you know, what can we do to help? You know, the Wessons are back and the family's back into the business. It was an incredible amount of support and outreach, and especially with the gun magazine, the writers Being on a shoestring budget, you purchase the assets out of a bankruptcy court, and then you've got, irritated vendors, that have been strung along, and you're trying to satisfy that. So it was very difficult transition to keep everybody happy and not having a big marketing budget. The best next thing was the writers, and boy, did they step up to the plate. We were busy. We got into production up to speed fairly quick. But yeah, we went along during the Wesson Firearms era, between 91 and 94, with the family being there. We produced some pretty cool things. And there's 4 things that my father always taught me growing up, especially in business. You have quality, service, price, and delivery. And quality, obviously, always number one. And that was instilled in his brain growing up. And you cannot be the best at all 4. Something's got to give. You're not going to have the best price, the best quality, the best service, the best delivery. You try to achieve that, but it's difficult. It's difficult. So something's always got to give, but never quality, never service. Usually what gives up is price or delivery. One thing that we always were taught, we don't sell price, we sell the rest of it and try to knock the rest of it out of the park. Part of the demise of the Wesson family manufacturing guns could be referred to as our stubbornness, because we didn't want to compromise quality. We held up production to make things right. As a business, you do one of 2 things. You either increase your revenue or decrease your spending. And usually it's a combination of the 2. When you're trying to enter a market like DB2, when you're going against the heavy hitters of Ruger and Colt, it's hard to enter any market as a more expensive gun. You need to make it worth someone's while to, okay, every dollar spent to get a dollar's worth of a gun. With quality comes cost. So entering a market like that, it's a challenge, and you're walking a fine line. But again, I think the demise over the years with the company, especially with the family, was we didn't want to compromise quality. I love guns, I love shooting, I love the heritage of the family, and I love, being a Wesson. Sticking with what you're good at was one thing that Dan was able to do. And I think with the Dan Wesson brand over the years, is they've been able to do that in innovation, quality. Those are 2 good rules of thumb. If you can do that, you can do a lot.
So Dan Wesson has forever been known for its quality, its innovation, its heritage and history, going all the way back to D.B. Wesson. This is the Dan Wesson Point Man. I want you to give us your impressions of this when I hand it to you.
Beautiful gun. You can see the workmanship, the pride. Wow. Wow, it's tight. Not being in the industry for 30 plus years, it's awesome to see that the tradition's being continuing, really. Just the quality of this gun it's solid, it's tight, it's just, there's no gaps. When you pick up a Dan Wesson, it's a Dan Wesson. It just feels different in your hand. Definitely fills a void in my heart to know that CZ was able to pick up the ball and run with this and do my grandfather proud, I'm sure. He'd like this, he would.